Good morning, Council and members of the public. We'll call this meeting to order. Because it wasn't on record, I'll say again that Councillor Foster will not be attending today for personal reasons. Under disclosure of pecuniary interest, I have two under general government section, both applying to the municipal grants. One is from Councillor Watson, I believe, and that is for being a member of the Stainer Curling Club, and for the same reason I claimed one as my wife is a member of the Curling Club. If a pecuniary interest that has not yet been declared comes to your attention through the meeting, please let the chair know. Under deputations, presentations, and petitions, we have none today in this section. And for other agency reports, I'll call the chief to the table. And good morning, Chief.
Good morning. Thank you. So for the month of December, the fire department responded to 129 calls for service, bringing our 2019 total to shy of 1,500. So we were 1,498, which is pretty average over the last number of years. We were down though from last year, 64 calls, which is good news, I guess. Now what was really increased was our second alarm calls, and those are the calls where we have to call out the off-duty full-time firefighters and the volunteers. So we had 28 second alarm calls in 2019 versus 12 and 15 the previous 2 years, so quite a significant increase in those second alarm calls. Just some notable occurrences. Christmas Eve we had an open fire. Somebody was burning illegally, and the fire department was called and responded. The occupant became violent and attacked one of the firefighters. The second one got involved, and it ended up the three of them in a bit of a tussle, and the result was one of the firefighters had a bleeding lip, the other one had a bleeding nose, and what he thought was a fractured foot. He's still off. It's not fractured, but there was some damage to the tendons in his foot, so he's been off since that time. So a bit of a scary call for the guys. I mean, that's not the normal. But the police responded very well. There was like 3 cruisers and 6 officers, and the man was taken away, and he'll be charged accordingly. So, and the only other thing worth noting is on January 10th we had a fire that was contained, but again it was an early detection that got us there, and anyway, after the investigation, it looked like a stovetop fire, but the stove was not on, and there was a baby monitor sitting on the stove, and it was actually the baby monitor that had an electrical issue and started on fire. So we notified the appropriate agencies, and there are some on the website or on the web that talk about having this type of incident, exploding baby monitors and all that sort of thing. So not to alarm the public, but it's something that it's good to go on and research the products that you're buying, make sure that they're an approved ULC or UL product. So. And just the last thing I wanted to mention was the deputy and I were down to Brampton to dependable emergency vehicles, looked at our rescue truck that should be delivered in about 4 weeks now. So long time coming. It was ordered in the early spring, and that's just the build time. So we're looking forward to that arriving in a month or so. Okay.
Thank you, Chief. Is there any other comments or questions from Council? If not, then I'll read the motion. The Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the January 2020 Fire Department report for information. Fire Department report January 2020. All those in favor? No, they didn't put that on this one. So okay. Could I have a mover and seconder for that? Okay, and we'll just show of hands again, all those in favor.
Mover and seconder.
That was moved by Councillor Kenny and seconded by Sylvia Bray. So we'll now move to the consent agenda, and there's only one item pulled, which was the Director of Recreation Event Facilities report dated January 23rd, Town Hall renovations project, and that was pulled by myself. So I don't think they know how to move this. Oh, maybe it's on. Okay, it's over here. Okay. Okay, resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee hereby received the January 23rd, 2020 consent agenda, items 3.4 through 3.7, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. That was moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by, I believe, Councillor Watson. And all those in favor? I don't have to just carry it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I just make, we have the ability to just make a comment on one of the consent? I didn't pull it, but just a comment?
Yes, go
On
ahead.
that. I just wanted to comment on section 3.6.4, the creative housing options. Very happy to see that staff will be looking at some zoning and building code things. It's just mentioned here that Simcoe County is going to grow by 37% in the next few years, and our senior population is going to double, and some of the options they're going to look at is co-housing, cooperative housing, like life leases, supportive housing, retirement communities, retirement homes. So I'm happy to see that going forward. Thank you.
So we'll move to item 3.4.5. Again, this is event and facility report dated January 23rd. Read the Town Hall renovations project. And I pulled that because this is a substantial amount of money, and I did not support waiving the normal tender process for this. The nature of renovation companies is that although we may not have had interest expressed in the past or work particular companies, there could be new companies. There could also be companies that at the time their workload was such that they didn't express interest in opportunities. And then the third thing, and I would be talking to that later in the meeting, there seems to be some clarification on our support for local business. In recent times, we've that hasn't been part of the criteria in the scoring. It's always been my understanding that local business is supported to a greater degree, and certainly the experts say that the compounded benefit of keeping monies within your community is 5 to 7 times. So I think it's very important that we go through the normal tender process. This is again a very large sum of money, so that's my comment. Is there any other comments or questions? So with that, we'll call for a vote. Oh yes, sorry. Moved by Councillor Watson and seconded by Councillor Walls. All those in favor?
Read the motion. Read the motion.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. The Community Service Section of Coordinating Committee recommends to Council to waive the municipal procurement policy requirement for tendering projects exceeding $50,000 in lieu of the 3 informal quotes submitted by known general contractors and evaluated by the facility foreman and director of recreation events and facilities. And further, that the council support the recommendation from staff to award the 4 phases of Town Hall renovation project on both the first and second floors to Mighton Construction Limited for $200,000 plus HST. And finally, that council approve an unbudgeted expenditure in the amount of $77,200 to cover all anticipated costs related to the Town Hall renovation project beyond the current budget allocation of $235,000 for both floors, and unbudgeted expenditures is to be covered partly from the building department reserves, 55,000, and the balance of 22,000 to come from the administrative reserve. Town hall renovation contract approval. So again, moved by Councillor Watson, seconded by Councillor Wells. All those in favor?
Your questions or
Yeah,
question,
Oh,
Mr.
okay,
Chairman?
I did it. Go ahead. Sorry,
Thank you.
Sylvia.
Yeah, just would like to ask a question to the director. So in waiving the policy, when you reached out to 3, did you reach out to 3 or did you reach out to 10 and just receive 3 tenders?
We did not formally advertise a tender, and that is the informal quote process that we've recommended for approval today. We reached out to 3. There was a sizable list moving through the 4 phases, and we worked with known contractors to try and get equivalent prices, and that was in the consideration of time primarily that we didn't go out to tender.
And then just to follow up to the CAO, this is within our purchasing policy to go this way?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so that requires coming to committee and seeking approval from committee for this exemption. Because of the value of the project, typically we would go through a request for a quotation or a tendering process. So this is an exemption through the normal purchasing policy provisions.
Because of timing.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? Okay, so all those in favor? So I believe that we have 2 opposed.
You have to call and ask for opposed.
So all those opposed? Okay, so it's carried by 4-2.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chair, if we could just state those who opposed for the record.
Yes,
So we would
okay, so
state-
the 2 in opposition were Deputy Mayor Bray and myself.
Thank you.
So I think we just now need to make a small adjournment until we're not switching?
Yes, we could have
5 minutes, is that good? Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute adjournment and change the chair to the public works section.
Thank you.
order the Public Works section of the agenda. One item was missed on the printed agenda, so it's going to be labeled 4.1.1, and the subject is the naming dedication of municipal facility, Sunward Estates Park. And do I do move in second at this point? Okay. We have it's been moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Deputy Mayor Bray that the Public Works Section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the application from Ms. Rosanna Chase together with the requisite nomination forms regarding a request to rename the Sunward Estates Park. And the motion by Councillor Wells is option A, Sunward Estates Park be renamed to Chase Family Park. So that's a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion, questions on this? Councillor Kinney, Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the concept is great. To have the ability to recognize individuals in our community who have contributed. I think the format is fantastic, and I agree with Councillor Wells on option A.
Thank you. Councillor Belanger.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very similar, I would say, further to recognizing contribution. Hopefully it would encourage future contribution, and certainly I think when we get into our new arena and library, it's quite common practice to have sponsorships and rooms named after a company or an individual. So I also support option A.
Thank you. Any other comments at this time? I'll just put my George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just from a procedural standpoint, perhaps the clerk could speak to the matter of adding this to the agenda. I think we've gotten into the discussion right off the bat, and I think the intent was to add it to the agenda first and then have the discussion, but I'll defer to the clerk. She may have some thoughts on that.
The procedural bylaw does allow for adding of an item to the agenda. I just don't know exactly the actual motion. I don't think a motion is required. I think it's at the will of the chair to look that up. If that's the case, we can continue with the discussion. I don't think there's a motion.
Okay, the clerk's just going to look up the exact procedural bylaw clause. Put my 2 cents in. We have Rosanna Chase and her husband Bart here today, member of the Chase family. I've known the Chase family, especially Mr. Cyril Chase, for many years. He's been a tremendous asset to this community, a developer in the community. He's done more than Sunward Estates also, but a real fine gentleman, and it's nice to see this going forward. Thank you.
If you would like to do a motion, Mr. Chair, while I look for it, you certainly can do a motion to add the item to the agenda.
Councillor Wells?
Mr. Chair, I think need to recognize that this actually was on the agenda in the beginning and somehow in the printing got missed, and therefore the public agenda didn't show it. However, I think the public needs to know that it was on the agenda, and for not to look for any reasons it just got missed. But rather than take a chance, why not let's err on the side of best practice and make a motion to add it to the agenda at this time. If it's redundant or unnecessary, well, so be it. But we've erred on the side of good practice.
Okay. Okay.
I'll make the motion.
Councillor Wells is making the motion to add the naming dedication of municipal facility, Sunset Estates Park, seconded by Councillor Belanger to add it to the agenda. We'll name it 4.1.1. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And then the actual motion, do I need to read it again, or? Works section, the coordinated committee does hereby receive the application from Ms. Rosanna Chase together with the requisite nomination forms regarding a request to rename the Sunbird Estates Park to rename to Chase Family Park. Those in favor?
Do we need a mover and seconder?
That was moved and seconded by Councilor Wells and Deputy Mayor
Oh,
Gray.
right.
Yeah, that was already done. Those in favor? Thank you, that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda at this point. There's been one item pulled from the consent agenda, which is 4.5.1. So I'll read the motion. Resolved that the Public Works section, a coordinated committee, it's moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Watson. Resolved that Public Works section, a coordinated committee, hereby receives the January 23rd, 2020 consent agenda items 4.4.1 through 4.7.5, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. Those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we'll move to 4.5.1, transit, bus stop advertising benches. It is moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Kinney. Resolved that the Public Works section, a coordinated committee, does hereby recommend to Council that it award the contract for the bus stop advertising benches, RFP number PW2019-28, to the Bench Press Limited, operating as Creative Outdoor Advertising, in the amount stipulated in their bid submission, and further that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute necessary agreements. That is the motion. Questions, comments?
Pulled by somebody.
Oh, it's pulled by Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to my comments on renovation, I am certainly in favor of the proposal, and I am in favor of always acting in the best interest of our taxpayers. There's a substantial financial difference. However, and I will make a motion at the end of this, where there needs to be clarification again, is we seem to have taken a very hit and miss approach to the support of local business. In the recent RFP related to real estate services, we accepted application or submission from outside the municipality. In the case of the renovation, we want to bypass the normal process and exclude. There could be very large renovating companies in Barrie that have done significant work within the municipality, and we decided to totally exclude them, even though it could be a substantial savings to the municipality. In addition, when we look at this, when it seems to be inconsistent, if we were to break this down in a cost by month, this particular advertising wouldn't even have to come to approval. It wouldn't be a significant enough amount of money that the department head under $5,000 could make the decision on going. Where we have other categories of products where we are paying a supplier tens of thousands of dollars annually without a competitive process. So I want to refer this back to staff to clarify to council what is our position on the support of local business. Is it going to consistently play a role in the scoring process? And are we going to have a competitive process for all categories of product where we are paying a supplier on an annual basis tens of thousands of dollars? Because I can tell you, just a small example, business cards. We have paid up to $59.99 for $100 for 500 business cards. And I can get those any day of the week between $4.99 and $9.99 and get them quickly. The rationale for supporting that increased cost is because we're supporting local business. So we need to have a more consistent approach to this. Because I'm all for, if it's all about price, if it's all about giving the lowest price to our taxpayer in every case, then we need to relook at our processes. So I'm making a motion to refer this back to staff so they can provide council clarification on the importance of supporting local business, and on in every case where a single supplier is getting more than $5,000 worth of business from the town a year, that we have a competitive process in place.
Thank you, Councillor Boulanger. Any-
Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Boulanger has just
Oh,
made a
yeah,
verbal
yeah.
motion, so we would ask
Yeah.
if there is a second.
Is there a seconder to that motion?
The motion doesn't.
Not seeing one. So the original motion stands at this point, or is there any further comments?
Just
Deputy Mayor Bray?
comment to the request to refer it back. I don't think that the referral you were asking for directly ties to this RFP.
Sorry?
I don't think that the motion that Councillor Boulanger was suggesting directly ties to this RFP. If you would have brought it up earlier, I might have had a greater desire to support it, but I think with this RFP, it was fairly clear what the scoring was going to be. There's a big difference in the finances, so I think this one kind of stands on its own merit.
Well, I could certainly table a motion separately for consideration for the same information coming back aside from this. So if you want to vote on this separately, I think our CAO has heard the concern, and certainly if all of council wants the same clarification that I want to, I would like that to come back as soon as possible.
Just procedurally, would that be a notice of motion, or that would be, like, I don't see it tied to this, so I don't want to pollute this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the Deputy Mayor, and that the councillor's motion has no status because it wasn't seconded. So it's not really up for debate, but I'll deal with the issue of the provisions in our purchasing bylaw dealing with providing emphasis to local firms. Our purchasing bylaw is a few years old. It is due for a review. There are restrictions in the province of Ontario dealing with putting emphasis on local purchases. There's the Federal Competition Act, and there's the Discriminatory Business Practices Act, which come into play when drafting bylaws dealing with purchasing and putting emphasis on local purchases. So committee can have a motion to request that the purchasing bylaw be reviewed with respect to this particular matter, or just leave it with myself, and I'll work with the treasurer and our budget and financial analyst who was responsible for drafting our current purchasing bylaw, and bring forward an updated bylaw for committee's consideration.
Councillor Keeney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's prudence in doing that because, as our CEO had mentioned, we're getting due to doing, like it's coming due. So if we could do that and then get clarification and get it up to date so that it becomes more clear.
Thank you. Councillor Boulanger?
Yeah, just a comment, as our CEO has made it clear in the past, unless we have a motion of council, it doesn't get added as new business, it doesn't get reported as old business, and the timelines are subject to the ability of staff to get to it. I would suggest it's an important enough issue that we should make a motion and have it added to new business, so that it's then reported at old business until such time as we do get the clarification back.
Deputy Mayor Bray?
Thank you. Further in the agenda, there's council priorities, which was a report that came forward for our CAO, and I wonder if this could be considered in that, as it could be a priority of the 2020 year, and we could figure out where it fits in. because I would really like to see a fulsome review where we actually look at whether we've grown to the size that a centralized purchasing department might be something to consider. I've worked with different municipalities kind of in my business world, and it's a whole different relationship when you deal with a purchasing agent who deals with purchasing. She doesn't deal with the sand plow and the sand. This person, she just deals with the business of buying product for the town. And I think it's maybe time to at least consider it. So I would prefer that this goes into our 2020 priorities and really gets a good look.
Yeah, and I think that's a good approach to it, and I think the minutes can reflect that initiative. Just make a comment. Our CAO touched on what I was going to ask, and that's the legality of trying to restrict these types of RFPs to your municipality. I remember decades ago that at one point it was, well, if you're going to work for town of Wasaga Beach, they wanted you to live in the town of Wasaga. Well, that's illegal. You can't do that. And that was really my thought. How I know you can put a component in the scoring part of it, but there gets to be a point where you're probably crossing a line, and that was really my concern, whether you could actually do that. And I'm hearing that you probably can't, but that could probably come up when we do the review of the purchasing policy. So, thank you, Councillor Vaughn.
Yeah, just a point of clarification then, if we waive the normal tendering process and we're excluding potential candidates that are outside the municipality, then are we in contradiction to what we just said?
I was just going to say, I think we're getting off
Yes.
here. We need to get back to the motion that's on the table.
Yeah. That can be discussed when we're doing the priorities and that. Okay, we have the motion. Those in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's carried 5-1, and Councillor Blanchet was in opposition. And I believe that's the end of the public works section of the agenda. So we'll take a 5-minute break. 5-minute break? What's your pleasure? 5, 10? 10. 10? Okay.
reconvene with the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee. At 11 o'clock, we have a public meeting, so we will take a break if we're in the middle of general government, or wait for it.
Keep picking on general government.
Or if Councillor Wells does a really efficient job, we will wait for 11 o'clock for the public meeting. In the meantime, we have some things listed under unfinished business. If there's no questions. We have a consent agenda, and there are 2 items that have been pulled. They are item 5.4.7, Economic Development Matters, the entrance signage, and 5.4.9, Housing Strategy Work Plan 2020-2021. Is there anything else that you would like to have pulled? Seeing none. All items listed.
Madam Chair.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I would like to comment on one, but not pull it once you, I don't know if it's
And
after
to
you.
comment before we vote, in case that comment influences our vote.
I can?
Yeah, go ahead and make
that's
your
appropriate.
comments.
Thank you. It is the 5.4.6, the new unit and building report, and I was very interested in seeing our media release yesterday, where it states that we've increased from 403 permits to 623 permits, and our construction value is almost doubled from 429 to 886. Very healthy. Will show the confidence in this council moving forward. And just a quick stat, the Canadian Real Estate Association has estimated that every house transaction generates $73,250 in spin-off expenditures, and a few of the things: household purchases, furniture and appliances, moving costs, renovations, services like financial, legal, appraisal, and of course property taxes. So based on our 347 new permits, that generates $25 million in spin-off activity in this municipality alone. And I think it just goes to prove that's the #1 industry in Wasaga Beach. The more people that move here, the more feet on the street, which adds to the commercial base and the attraction of commercial business coming into Wasaga Beach. So it's very happy news. Thank you.
Thank you. Great comments. Seeing none. Moving to the consent agenda. All items listed below will be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless we have had it, unless they have been pulled. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Wells. Resolved that the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the January 23rd, 2020 consent agenda, items 5.4 through to 5.7, and that all recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding the agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion carries unanimously. First item pulled is item 5.4.7, entrance signage, and this was pulled by Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my only comment is it seems to be an open-ended timeline, part of the recommendation to get, if we don't put the signage up right now, I would like to see that tighten up considerably with a decision. I wouldn't like to see this going on for months, missing the whole summer with no entrance sign there. And it's also been, I've mentioned it before, and I've heard it from several residents, that we've lost our service club logos on these signs. A number of years ago, they're not there. I've had requests from former Councillor Marilyn Snyder has mentioned it several times, and I've heard from service clubs that they would like that recognition, and most towns do have that there. I think I've talked to our CAO, George, about trying to do something. So when these signs go up, I'd really like to see recognition of our service clubs. I think that shows the vitality of our community, what's available, everything from Provises to Rotaries, Lions, Canets, and so forth and so on that we have. So I'd like to see that incorporated with the signage when we go. Thank you.
Councillor Kinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Echoing my colleagues' comments about tightening up the time frame, I too saw that we didn't have an end time put in. And again, you're entering a community, and without something there, the report was great, and it emphasizes how important to have something right there, but not having anything there over a long period of time leaves the people guessing, who are we? So I'd like to see, even if we have to change it because of your reasoning, something there that we can, and people visiting and people that live here, ownership. I think that's what we're getting at. And again, with the logos of our service clubs, I too agree the concept is a valid one, and also for that same reason, they're part of the community, and their advertisement, I think, and ownership of our community is important to display.
Councillor Wells?
Yeah, much of what I might have said is there. I think it's important that there be an entrance signage. If the timeline is such that revisions cannot be dealt with prior to what I would say maybe the 1st of May would be my deadline, then I believe very strongly that the original signage, as it was before, be replaced. We had to do that on Sunnydale Road a year ago. And now on 92, and I think 92 is one of our major entranceways. So I want to see a sign there on 92, but not later than the 1st of May, personally. And if it's a replacement of the existing sign, so be it, and it can be changed out for something new later if need be. At that point, we'll be changing out everything. So if it can't be changed out in time, then it needs to be re-erected. With respect to the service club sign, that actually was never on the main entrance sign. It was a separate sign. It was basically a 4x8 sign that was placed either somewhat before or somewhat after the town entry sign, and it had all the logos of the clubs on it. And so I fully support the replacement of that at every entrance, because I don't believe at the time that those club signs were actually at every entrance. I believe they were at a couple of entrances, Sunnydale Road perhaps and 92, but I don't believe they were at other entrances. And it should be at each and every entrance. Wherever the town sign is, so should be the other one, the other logo sign. So I would support a position that happen, but I do not support leaving signage down past the 1st of May.
Councillor Blanchet?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to Councillor Wells' comments, a couple of things is that I don't know how the impact of the rebranding, both the tourism brand and the updating of the town corporate brand, which we're in the process of, would impact the design of the new signage. And further, we have spent a significant amount of time and money related to the brand, and you know, I'm sure the experts have you know, some thoughts on not to water down your brand. And just further to the service clubs, some of the new signage that we have put up with parking pylons with the plastic base, I would recommend that might be a great opportunity to have something similar with those logos on, and not necessarily just at the entrance, but the Recplex would also be a great location because a lot of their activity occurs there. And just for consideration. But I agree with Councillor Wells. We need to get something up and then take the appropriate time, because I think you know, eventually, you know, all of that signage may be updated, not just one location. Thank you.
Councillor Kinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification. I tend to remember we did have a Welcome to Wasaga Beach sign many years ago that did have logos of our service clubs on it, And then there was a revisit of that sign where they were taken up, and then there was a roar within our community from our service clubs that we weren't being looked at, and then that generated the signage with just them on it. I'm pretty sure that's how it rolled out.
So service clubs are important. Councillor Wells.
I'm prepared to move an amendment, seeking a seconder to the motion, to the report that would indicate that entrance signage be replaced. I will not indicate in the motion, I will not make the motion include how it's replaced, but the entrance signage be replaced either with the new or the precedent equivalent signage not later than May the 1st.
Okay. Do you want to refine the amendment, or can I keep going with the comments?
Councillor Wells has proposed an amendment to the motion. If there is a seconder to that amendment,
Okay,
or if you want to.
so there is.
Madam Chair, I believe that the amendment has to take precedent, and then you can take comments about the amendment. If the amendment's defeated, you can continue to take comments
Okay.
about the original motion.
So next on my list was Mayor Byfolchi, were your comments
Well, it's
connected to the
dealing with
amendment?
it's dealing with timing. I was just wondering if we have a staff member at the end of the table, if he could maybe just speak to the timing, because that seems to be everybody's concern.
Sorry, thank you for bringing me here. But I don't think the timing has been defined yet. There's a lot of larger level projects, wayfinding, that we haven't been approved for from the county on an official basis yet. I don't think we've been able to establish a work back plan specifically to address that. And so that's why there wasn't a specific hard date put onto that council report.
Okay, and I just needed that clarification because I wanted to make sure that there wasn't timelines. The council's
Already in.
the council's recommendation is to have something up there by a certain date, so I just needed that. Thank you.
Okay. So do I read what I think the amendment is, and Councillor Wells confirms that I
Sure.
was listening appropriately?
Sure.
So that it would basically be the original motion with an addition that said, and that A sign is in place by May 1st, 15th, I can't remember what date you were
By
looking
May
for.
1st, 2020.
And is May 1st practical with frost and,
I can only respond that I can't see why May 1st is not appropriate or doable if in fact it turns out that it's the original signage, because whoever prepares the signage it's probably still available to be replaced. They did it on Sunnydale Road last year, so I can't imagine that we can't get that one done fairly quickly. If there is something new that has been approved by this council before that, and it can still be erected by May 1st, so be it. I think that's what my motion indicated, that there be something there.
okay, so then I will read the amended motion. The Development Services Section of Coordinated Committee recommend that Council direct staff to defer replacement of the entrance sign on Highway 92 until such time that staff can report back to Council with a recommendation for an entrance sign design based on existing wayfinding and signage development being worked on by the town and the region, but that a sign is in place by May 1st, 2020.
I was just going to say, I think we have to vote on the amendment first.
That would be the, oh, sorry, okay.
Just what the council's proposing, and then we go to the main motion.
Okay. So would you like to draft an amended motion then? Because I was just going to I was going to amend the original motion, but go ahead and draft one and I'll read it.
Through me, Chair, we do vote on the proposed amendment prior to drafting a main motion with the amendment
So would you like
included.
to read that amendment?
The amendment was just to add that the sign be in place by May 1st, and so we would need a seconder on that amendment in order to move forward with a vote on the amendment.
So is there a mover and a seconder? So Councillor Wells and Councillor Watson?
I think Councillor Boulanger had seconded it previously already, the amendment. Madam Chair, may I just say, I think there's a conflict somehow, just in the way you presented it, because the first part of the motion says defer, and the second, and the amendment says to replace, to have in place a sign. So we have
But
to
the clerk
be
has said we're just voting
on the
that,
amendment only. That's why,
right,
that's what I was
the
getting
amendment
at.
that she read.
You're really only saying the motion to have signage in place by May 1st, at which point we then return to the main motion as amended.
So, all in favor of May 1st? Any opposed? So then that carries unanimously. So then the original motion would be as amended, to have a sign in place by May 1st, and all in favor? Any opposed? So then that one carries unanimously too. And that would have been moved by? Councillor Watson, and seconded by Councillor Blanchet. Okay. Clear?
Madam Chair, just to our Economic Development Officer, since he's here, with respect to the timing of the report coming back, dealing with the design, obviously that will have to be brought back well in advance of the installation of the sign, so that the tender can be done and whatnot. When were you thinking of the timing of the report coming back for committee?
I can prepare a report for the next coordinated committee.
Thank you.
If we're in agreement.
Councillor Wells?
Madam Chair, I guess, and to the CAO, looking for clarification, or to Kyle, any new entrance signage is going to have to be dependent upon in my view, the review of the town logo. Because if we are in a process of reviewing the logo, I would have thought the logo might very well be a part of the signage. We have the tourism one, but the corporate logo, I would think, might be a part of that. No? Okay, fine. Yep.
Have to see, Madam Chair, just have to see
Yeah.
when the design comes back
Yeah.
in terms of the options and how, if the logo's integrated and which is used, et cetera.
Okay, finished with entrance signs? Thank you, Tyler. The next item to be pulled was the Housing Strategy Work Plan 2020 to 2021. And I think Nathan Lukash is joining us at the table. This was pulled by Councillor Boulanger and Councillor Wells. Hi. Did you want to open with your questions, Joe?
Yes, it wasn't really a question so much as we just came from Roma, and there were quite a few breakouts on housing, and certainly in many jurisdictions, affordable housing is at a crisis level, is how it's being referred to. And I thought this report, although it wasn't in a ton of detail, it did indicate the setting of targets. And I agree that that's very important, and I just wanted to comment that to take it one step further is, to establish the timelines as to when those targets could be set, but even to consider to doing it by some of the category of housing. Because it's great to talk about actively going out and encouraging these types of development. But, especially in our municipality, far and away, the creation of new single detached bungalows and townhomes have been the focus. And during some of the breakout sessions, there is some pretty significant innovation happening that I wasn't aware of. Many in the industry maybe, but particularly the split ownership of a home converted to have multiple suites, where people are actually going in and buying 25% of a home or 20% of a home. The particular presenter, it was I think they were on about their 8th project, so they, you know, it wasn't something that's been going on for 20 years, but it sounded like it's working very well, and over and above satisfying the housing need, it has people more included, eliminates isolation. If there are people that need specialized services, like maybe some level of nursing or social assistance, that can be split by multiple people in the home. So it was kind of a nice interface between a nursing home and a retirement facility, and certainly in the breakout session, they indicated it's very effective at keeping people in homes longer. And so anyhow, that was my comment. If we could set a timeline as to establishing targets, and you know, it's something we should celebrate if we can participate in some of this innovative housing solutions. So thank you.
Yeah, just to comment through you, Madam Chair, that's a very good point, and I'm glad that those conversations are happening at the provincial level. There is quite a bit of innovation right now. There are 4 guides that the province has recently released, as I'm sure you heard about, mainly relating to building code and some planning matters relating to shared housing scenarios, like you mentioned, as well as tiny homes, and also the new sort of provincial direction on accessory, or they're termed additional residential units right now, which are basically what we've been calling second suites in homes, or accessory apartments. We permit them now, but the province is now asking us to go one step further and do more to encourage them, because they do provide a great opportunity to utilize existing housing stock for rental housing opportunities. They've also asked municipalities to allow them in detached accessory buildings on single detached dwelling properties. So homes with detached units that would house a rental suite. So that's something that we will need to discuss as we move forward, how to implement that. That's a requirement now in the Planning Act to permit that in our official plan. And so there's a number of different ways that we can have a say in what the parameters around those are, where they would be permitted, what the standards would be for them to be established, etc. So we'll be having those conversations as staff at a working group level, and bring those forward to council for your consideration moving forward as we build our new official plan and our zoning bylaw that would implement it. So I guess you also had a report on the agenda today from the Age-Friendly Community Advisory Committee that kind of made that recommendation to look at alternative forms of housing as different ways to provide for the significant need in our community, other than the traditional single detached dwelling. So my report today as well, that wasn't pulled on the official plan process as well, sort of sets out a little framework for that. And I'm sorry for the rambling response, but it's a good opportunity to kind of express some of the things that we are bringing forward from a housing standpoint to really address what the crisis is, and hoping for some feedback and some further conversation with council as we roll those policies out.
Thank you. It's a short report, but there's a lot in it. Mayor Byfolchi.
Thank you. Just a comment. I'm the chair for the county's Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and we did have a meeting last week where we will be having a forum, trying to get the right people in the room to have discussions, and that will look at building code, unit sizes, financing options. You know, we usually are looking at this for the older population, but how do we get young couples who can afford the normal house out there into maybe a smaller unit that they can afford, and what we look at to get there. So we also have our vice chairs on the FCM board, so he's taking a motion that we approved at that meeting with regard to the building code, that we really need to look at that. Is there ways to build a little bit cheaper, still meeting proper codes and things like that? So I think through that committee and the municipal liaison group that meets out of there, there'll be some good stuff coming out of there as well.
Thank you. Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it's certainly a brave new world with these new directives from the province. Several years ago, just one example of what you may want to look at, a few years ago we brought limitations in on second floors of garages in Wasaga Beach because when people built new garages, you could put a second story on it and they were typically becoming apartments, and we cut that off to limit the ceiling height in them so that they could not be converted to apartments. So that's going to have to be looked at as far as their bylaw goes. Laneway houses, maybe another one. I'm thinking of properties that may front on a couple of streets or something. I'm looking at the Vancouver as an example. They've got laneways everywhere. Laneway houses are permitted. Very small lots, mind you, but they still are allowing laneway house road. Just about every house in Vancouver has a basement apartment. Again, it's affordability and people buying houses to try and help pay for their mortgages. But one issue that's going to come up is the parking part of it. Vancouver gets very little snow, and when you look at a typical Vancouver residential street, not unlike some of our subdivisions, during the day the street looks pretty good when people are at work or at school and everything. You go there 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night or first thing in the morning, both sides of the street are packed with cars. They allow parking on both sides of it. So essentially you have one lane down the middle of that street. Because they don't have to push much snow, it's okay. In our case, we have that consideration there, and I think that's really going to have to be consideration about the parking and the parking on site, because if you start having this, it's going to create other problems. So that's one big thing we're going to have to be looking at. And I think overall, the density of development in Wasaga Beach. Typically, single-family bungalows have been the king. But I think we're moving that way, and the province is saying that way, but I think we're looking at more densities.
Thank you. This motion was pulled by both Councillor Belanger and Councillor Wells, and I neglected to let Councillor Wells speak, so go ahead, Stan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I read the report, certainly support the concept of second residences, affordable housing, retirement homes, long-term care, so I don't want any of my comments to be perceived as in any way being contrary to that. The reason I asked to have it pulled was really the discussion section, the second set of bullets, which refers to increase in rental apartments in existing houses and detached accessory buildings. And I think, and I've had some conversation with Nathan about that, and I think we have to accept, we are in a position where we don't really have any opportunity to really have any discussion about how that, whether it's appropriate or inappropriate or whatever, because it's been mandated by the provincial government that this is now been imposed upon the municipalities. And so we now have a significant zoning matters as the official plan and zoning bylaws are going to be updated because I believe our zoning bylaw prohibits accommodation in accessory buildings on properties. Our zoning bylaw prohibits two houses on the same lot. Our bylaw prohibits two driveways to the same house. So this is going to necessitate some really significant changes to our zoning and to what everybody on council and every resident of the community has understood to be the case. And we know how some people react to what's happening on their adjoining properties. And for some people, this is going to create a significant impact if, in fact, it occurs on properties next to them. Because this means that the province has now mandated that if I have a detached 2-car garage on my property, which I happen to do, but it's irrelevant, I can now convert that to a residence. So now the questions arise. It's now going to create issues for the building department and public works, because what's required now for that residence in terms of sewer and water connections and hydro and so forth and so on. So there are some implications for every department in this town for us to implement this provincial mandate. It brings to light the whole issue of tiny homes. Am I in a position to place a tiny home or more? Is it one detached accessory building, or is it how many can I fit on there? So again, our zoning kicks in terms of the setbacks. What is going to be the impact to this community on its setback zoning? Right now, you're only allowed one accessory building. As the province mandated that we can now have as many as you can fit on the property by utilizing a shed conversion or a garage conversion or moving in a tiny home. So I think this issue that we've been dealt with is something that going forward we need to be aware has some very significant impacts in very many areas of this town and how it has done business in the past. Our bylaws, everything is going to be affected by this change going forward, and it will be significant. That's my comment.
Thank you. Councillor Boulanger.
Thank you, Chair. And it also in the report does refer to the TAC conversion, and again, I view that as quite a complex issue, and certainly it's been talked about around council tables for quite a extensive period of time, and very similar to Councillor Wells' remarks, it has a huge implication, and I for one have I certainly believe we have to have very diverse and affordable housing, and we need to work on that, but the location of that housing is important as well. Like, I mean, currently we have what has become significant social housing in some of what I consider the prime real estate in our community that I would hopefully see developed and provide a return in property tax much differently in the future. Like, I mean, with, you know, high quality accommodation and attractions and that type of thing. So it's a very complex issue, and some of what we're talking about is this innovation and these alternatives has to start becoming in place, so that as we transition and develop and potentially displace some of the lowest cost housing in our community right now, that it doesn't have a devastating impact on families.
Councillor Kim. Oh, sorry. Nathan?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a comment on that, and that's really the approach from the policy standpoint, is to create more opportunities for rental housing in the community. Right now there's very little to almost none, and so by creating different opportunities and options there, we hope to replace some of what you described as the properties that are being used for that purpose with newer, more improved opportunities for people in the community, and in time, as we create policies that encourage redevelopment and higher density residential opportunities in the nodes, which is, I think, a lot of the location of a lot of the properties you're talking about, that will transition to a broader mix of housing. Right now we're about 90% single detached dwellings, and over the past 10 years we've been moving in more of a direction of townhomes and more apartments being proposed, and that's all very good because it provides more opportunities for people as they both transition through age and new families and younger people to have opportunities that they can afford and that are attainable for their income levels in our community.
Councillor Guinea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, Nathan, you never ramble. You tend to give us good information, and that's, to me, never rambling. First off, I think we're moving in the right direction with regards to diversifying houses and making more affordable. I live on a small street, and I know darn well it's a really old house, and they got a really old garage, but there's an apartment over top of it, and it's been there for years, and it's just been there, no big deal. But I really think that the strategy is timely, and it's something that the province wants us to move forward to, and I default to Nathan if there's any kind of timeline that the province impacted. I don't know if there is or not, but I think again, if we look at it in the proper way, and then we can develop safe, affordable housing for our residents that, you know, promotes diversity and also does it in a way that we as a community are looking to develop a strategy around it. We're just not doing it haphazardly. We're developing something that would be concrete and we can move forward with.
Thank you. Mr. Ciego.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question to Nathan with respect to the zoning provisions and the application of some of these principles across the municipality. As you're aware, the municipality has evolved over many years, and there's narrow streets, there's wide streets, there's small houses, there's big houses, there's duplexes, there's various forms of housing. And I'm just curious with respect to the planning department, when it does its review, will it be looking at the various neighborhoods, various streets, and taking factors such as a narrow street, narrow lots, duplexes into consideration when it looks at the potential for intensification? Just to go to Councillor Wells's comment with respect to some neighborhoods may not lend themselves to intensification just because the way the neighborhood developed, the type of housing, the street configuration, but other neighborhoods may. And I'm just curious whether the department will be looking at the municipality neighborhood by neighborhood to determine which neighborhoods lend themselves to the various forms of intensification and when ones that don't, and maybe some for a particular use and others for another use, because I think potentially a blanket approach may lend itself to unintended consequences with respect to some of the points that have been raised around the table.
Through you, Madam Chair, very good question. One thing we've been looking at through the OP so far is sort of at the very high level, what is our community structure, and that's identified in our report on the official plan update. So we've got our nodes where we're going to concentrate the higher density forms of development, such as apartments, stacked towns, back-to-back towns, fourplexes, triplexes, that range of kind of, for our scale, higher density and medium density uses. As we look at how to provide more intensification opportunities in our, what we call our neighborhoods, which are our residential areas outside of those nodes, we have been kind of wrestling with what approach to take. Currently, we've so far moved down the path of moving from a place where only single detached dwellings with some accessory apartments are permitted to broadening that to allow semis within those neighborhoods as a broad brush approach, and then looking at the different other lower density forms of housing types that could be permitted in those areas and might be acceptable in those neighborhoods. So the province has asked us to broaden the permissions for accessory apartments semis we've added as an option, but then what else? You know, one of the things we're wrestling with, and we'd like feedback from the council and the public on as we consult on this, is what level of intensification would be permitted within neighborhoods and where. So I think that sort of leads to what you're describing is are there certain areas, geographic areas in our municipality where triplexes or fourplexes or sort of the low end of our medium density permissions could be allowed and still have the flavor of a neighborhood and not significantly impact those that live in those neighborhoods. So that's a tricky balancing act. To date, we've been looking at currently our official plan allows for medium density uses in residential areas without an official plan amendment along our corridors, our arterial and our collector road corridors, in areas that have community facilities like commercial uses and institutional and other public uses, recreation uses. So as we've been looking at how to handle the question that you're asking, we've been moving down that path as well, and not specifically identifying neighborhoods particularly, but more what are the criteria where a neighborhood could accept a housing type like a triplex or maybe a fourplex or smaller street-related townhomes without a significant impact on a neighborhood. So sort of in those edges or in those transition areas outside the nodes that would sort of transition out to the lower density neighborhoods. So that describes a little bit of our thought process so far, and I tried to kind of address a little bit of what you were getting at, and I'm happy to continue this conversation in this forum and also in other forums with council as well as we move forward with what might be an acceptable approach.
Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one other topic. It's just hitting the news in Collingwood now, but it's the issue of monster homes going in against existing homes, I guess. Typically in the newer subdivisions, that's probably not going to be an issue because everything is built out. The homes are, relatively new or new, but in some of the older neighborhoods, I think that just needs to be consideration in your thought processes, how that can be monitored, because if you start, especially if you're going to put a couple of apartments in a building, so if you're going to go over the maximum height, maximum setbacks, you're going to have a pretty big structure there going into some existing neighborhoods doing it. So it's just one more consideration in the thought process going forward. It's becoming an issue. Whether you're going to bring in things about lighting or what do you call it, shading or that with buildings. People all of a sudden you've got light and you've got this building and you're now in shadow all the time. So there's going to be a lot of considerations.
Councillor Wells.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in reference to George's comments and Nathan's response, and I fully agree that this is something that's got to be worked on going forward. At the same time, my earlier discussion with respect to the detached, the government, as it does quite often, dumps a mandate on us and then doesn't give us any tools to implement it or not implement it, or choose where to implement it or choose where not to implement it. This is just an overall mandate that says you shall allow, just as it did you shall allow. So now the question becomes is what opportunities does a municipality have, and the way the legislation reads, we have no opportunity to take into effect. And I agree totally that those are issues that need to be taken into consideration. But this particular mandate, and I know we were talking about semis and triples and quads and so forth, and that's a whole different issue than in a detached accessory building, a completely different concept, and yet we have no tools to do anything with this other than implement it, and so I think it's going to be interesting going forward.
Councillor Blanche?
My last comment, I promise, but in delivering invitations to the Christmas dinner, I had the opportunity on 60th Street, I believe it was, to see it looked like a fairly new build, and it was a home for special needs, and it was probably 6 to 8 tenants. And you know, as you drove by, it was a very nice looking building. Everything was good, and I'm just wondering, like, I mean, when we talk about existing neighborhoods, that's one thing, and it gets a little more complicated in considerations. But when we talk about all of the new development that's underway in many areas of our town, is like what is our current process or ability, whether it's by exception or by zoning, that you know that a unit with 6 suites that looks like a home could be built or even encouraged, or even further, that you know a developer is strongly encouraged to do some of that within a subdivision, because the need is there. Like, I mean, I don't think that anyone would deny that there's a market for it, but if you can continue to build single detached bungalows and sell them, and if that's the highest form of build from a profitability standpoint, then unless we somehow intervene or incentivize or do something, you know, we're going to continue to have primarily that kind of build in a lot of these new subdivisions outside of the intensification roads. So, are you familiar with the particular unit I was talking about, and what the, like, obviously the zoning allowed for it, so it's in what I would consider a residential neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's fairly specific, and I'm not.
Yeah, no, I don't know. So, and you don't have to, if you're not sure of it, we can talk later. But my point is it's either for neighborhoods that are not yet established, it might be easier to get those rules in place and do the encouragement to get this type of build going faster than conversion, or worrying about how the neighbors are going to feel about it, because they would have that insight going in.
One last comment?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just to kind of wrap up, I appreciate all the comments today, and I think to echo one comment, it is a brave new world that the province is setting out for us, and I think it's important for us as leaders in the community to really take the approach that housing is a critical issue here and in most other communities in Ontario. So there will be some challenges moving forward with how to implement some of the mandated provincial direction. But working together through our building department and our licensing department, I think we can come up with strategies and programs for some of these more unique and newer forms of housing that we will present to you and be able to implement in our community, and hopefully be leaders in terms of providing more opportunities for attainability for housing in our community.
Thank you for summing up that it is an opportunity. I think it really is an opportunity, particularly from the age-friendly point of view, the affordability point of view, and I was really happy to see the tourist accommodation conversions included, because I think they are all tied together to make a complete community. So thank you. Seeing nothing else, I will read the motion. That is moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Belanger. Resolved that the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee receive this report on the Housing Strategy Work Plan 2020 to 2021 and authorize staff to pursue the action items contained therein. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion passed unanimously. Thank you. And Ms. ends the Outlet Services section of Coordinated Committee. We will reconvene at 11 for a public meeting, and at 10:15 we will kick off with General Government and Councillor Wells.
back for the general government section of the coordinated committee. I'll just note that I have two statements of pecuniary interest for this section. One is from Councillor Watson with respect to the municipal grants, as he is a member of the Stainer Curling Club, and I have one from Councillor Belanger also relating to the Stainer Curling Club grants because his wife is a member. And when we note the items that are pulled, that particular item has been pulled for that reason, and that reason only, that there are conflicts of pecuniary interest been stated. George has asked if he can have a moment just before we commence the actual agenda to speak to an item that came from the previous part of coordinated committee, which was the purchasing policy. So George?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so general government oversees treasury and administration, and the purchasing policy falls under that responsibility. I just wanted to make a point with respect to the purchasing policy, because I didn't want council and the viewing audience to have a misunderstanding based on the earlier conversation. So in the current purchasing policy, there is a statement, paragraph 10, that indicates, and I'll read it, quote, "The town shall encourage the procurement of goods and services from local suppliers where feasible and practical to do so." End of quote. So that statement is in the purchasing policy now. So that, and as well as the rest of the document, would be the review that I spoke about earlier. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make that comment.
All right, deputations, presentations, petitions, public meetings, we have none. Unfinished business, we have the signed bylaw review. Any question or comment? Seeing none. Other agency reports, we have none. And so we will move to the consent agenda. I'll note that 3 items have been pulled from the consent agenda. The first one is 6.5.3, the report on the closed meeting investigator. That has been pulled by Councillor Watson. Item 6.5.4, with respect to municipal grants. That item has been pulled by only because of the conflict of interest statements by Councillor Watson and Belanger. No other indication has been given to pull that report for any other reason. And 6.5.7, the smoking and vaping bylaw from the bylaw department has been pulled by myself. So I'll read the consent agenda resolution. Resolved that, this is moved by Mayor by Fulci and seconded by Councillor Kinney. Resolved that General Government Section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the consent agenda items 6.4 through 6.7, and that recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and to be voted on separately. All in favor? Motion is carried without objection. So moving to the first item that has been pulled, 6.5.3, pulled by Councillor Watson. It's the clerk's report, appointment of a closed meeting investigator. And I'll read the motion. It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Bray and seconded by Councillor Belanger. Resolved that General Government Committee recommend to Council that the current joint agreement for closed meeting investigator services through local authority services not be renewed, and that an agreement be adopted to provide these services through Principles Integrity, the town's current integrity commissioners, to coincide with the current expiration of the integrity commissioner agreement. And Councillor Watson, you wish to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regards to, I don't know if it needs to go back to staff for reconsideration or not, but I would like to see consideration of going to the Provincial Ombudsman Service for closed meetings. I happened to, they had a booth set up at Roma. I happened to stop in there, pick up some literature, spoke with them about it. I brought back some literature which I've given to the CAO to look at. They, I think, currently represent over 200 municipalities in the province. There's no charge for their services. I've seen some of our neighboring municipalities going that route recently, so I really like that to be considered. That service is available, and I think the cost factor is tremendous. So that's my comments on it.
Thank you, George. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to see us look at the ombudsman also, and it's not that the recommendation in the current report doesn't recommend a very good service. I'm just looking at the need of the resource that we're buying or possibly buying, the frequency of it, and one of the key components, and yes, they do a good job as far as teaching and helping out, where maybe the ombudsman doesn't do it, but from just a strict cost factor, I'd like to see us look at that, or as Councillor Watson said, directive act to staff to get a better feel for that agency.
Deputy Mayor Bray?
Thank you. I have no issue if it goes back to staff for more information, because I would like to know how many times we have used the services of a closed meeting investigator, because I don't think that this is a really big deal. I know at the county we shared the service previously, and they have just changed providers, and there was a huge jump in the service that in their new service provider. It had gone up to a range of whether it's $350 to $700 an hour. So obviously principal's integrity is good value for money. In my past experience with the ombudsman, they might be free, but I don't think you're going to get much from them. I found that they were very slow, very very backlogged, very difficult to deal with. So if those things could be included in a report that comes back, principally with, or primarily with, how big a service is this to our municipality before we spend too much time and effort looking into it.
Okay, Mayor Polch?
Thank you. I'm supportive of the motion. I have no issue if it goes back for some further information. I'm supportive of principal's integrity doing it because of a timing issue. If because it will most likely be someone from a resident who, from the public, who comes forward looking to put forward a complaint. And quite frankly, I think the Ombudsman's office will take forever to get back to them. And whereas with principal's integrity, they may get to an investigation quicker. So I agree, like how many times does this get used would be good to know, and I'm really good either way.
Okay. I'm going to speak to it. I also am more supportive of using the ombudsman. I think the issue of a closed meeting investigation as opposed to a conflict of interest investigation, they tend to be two separate issues, two separate catalysts probably that would initiate a complaint in those matters. So I'm not particularly supportive of having the same persons, no reflection whatsoever on any of the integrity commissioners, but not supportive of having the same parties doing both, taking both responsibilities. Certainly there is a cost factor as well, and as Councillor Watson has said, there's over 200 municipalities, I forget the total number, but it's well over 200, which is half the municipalities of the province of Ontario that are using the Ombudsman as their closed meeting investigator. And I have to admit, being a bit of a news junkie and watching Municipal World daily, almost daily, and whatever, I have not seen any complaints being registered against that service. So that would be the direction that I would be choosing to go if the motion were different. I did hear Councillor Watson and I did hear Councillor Bray suggest a referral. Can I ask if Councillor Watson wishes to move it and Councillor Bray wishes to second that it be referred back? And I'm seeing nods. So I have a motion from Councillor Watson, a motion from Councillor Bray that it be referred back to staff for further consideration. All in favor? It is passed with no objection. The second item that was pulled was the Finance and Treasurer's report, and it was pulled only because of the two individuals having pecuniary interests. So I'll read the motion. General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee. Change pages. Recommend to council that it approve the grants listed under quote average grant award column from Appendix A to this report under the annual municipal grants program. It was not pulled by anybody. Councillor Watson is pushed back from the table. Councillor Belanger is pushing back from the table. Anybody needing comment? Seeing none, all in favor? The motion is carried without objection. A count of 4 to 0.
Mr. Chair,
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Dina, I didn't see.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Chair. Just to make committee aware, and it's certainly fine to refer the report back to staff, but I want to make sure that the committee is aware that we will be using the provincial ombudsman in the lag time before I can get back with another report, as this contract will end at the end of January. So there's a time frame with regards to making a recommendation and choosing our ombudsman. And I can bring back a report, but in that time frame, we will revert to the ombudsman by making that referral.
Okay. So by default, meaning that,
Yes.
that as of the end of the month, we do not have a closed meeting
Correct.
investigator because the contract expired and we are
Correct.
required to have one. And where we don't appoint one, by default, it becomes the ombudsman.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. The next item that was pulled was 6.5.7. Jeff, do you may want to comment or may not. I've asked to have this pulled. It's the e-smoking vaping on municipal property bylaw. And I've asked to have it pulled only because, I guess, of the areas of exception that were listed as part of the report. Because essentially this bylaw, as it's being proposed, says there shall be no smoking or vaping on municipal property. That's the beginning point. Then we get down to a section later which talks about the need for, or the suggestion of, I don't believe it's a need, the suggestion of a designated smoking area on some of the municipal properties. And I don't have the actual report sitting in front of me, but I believe it was the parking lots here at Town Hall, the parking lot at the Recplex, the parking lot at the Arena, there might have been one more. I guess my particular position is that I do not support those exemptions. Whether someone smokes or vapes or not is entirely their own prerogative. But if we are banning it on municipal property, then I believe we should be banning it on municipal property, period. If we look to hospitals, for example, RVH, Collingwood General and Marine, it's clearly no smoking or vaping anywhere on hospital property. If we look to schools, no smoking or vaping anywhere on the school property. There are not designated exceptions. If we talk about designated areas that are more than 20 meters from the entranceways, well, it's going to be somewhat hard to determine, or unless we're going to draw a yellow line around this building, where is 20 meters from each of the entrances in terms of this playground park here, the tennis courts, and so forth that exist on this parking lot? Where is the 20 meters on the Recplex parking lot with respect to the playground that's next door? It's probably at one end it's well more than 20, but at other parts it might not be. Plus you've got families and everybody else going to and from their cars in the parking lots, particularly on the property of the Recplex. I won't go on, but it is my particular position that I will not support the bylaw in its current form. I believe we should simply say no smoking, no vaping on municipal property and leave it at that. So that's my position. So I will not be supporting the bylaw in its current form.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would support that position also, but is there a distinction about being in your car, Jeff? I thought I had read somewhere that that's considered personal or private property or something if you're sitting in your car and smoking. Am I correct in that, or does that not enter into it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, so if it's on the property, it's prohibited. If whether you're inside a vehicle or not, it could still be still considered on our property. Okay, if I could add some clarification as well, Mr. Chair. The properties that were included in the designated smoking areas were the fire halls, Public Works, the sports park, town hall, and Wasaga distribution. Didn't include the recplex or the arena simply because under the Smoke Free Ontario Act, they can't smoke on the property at all within 20 meters from the property boundary, so we can't conflict with that legislation. And the rationale for making that a consideration was more or less for court days, for employees who smoke, you know, for visitors, for, you know, council meetings, stuff like that. But we can certainly head in that direction. I just was thinking for, you know, from that perspective, might have been a good idea, but obviously open to getting rid of that part.
Thank you for that, Jeff, and I don't know whether there's consensus at the table for that. I'd have to hear whether there's consensus to make that, to withdraw that from or not. But I guess, you know, I would just simply say too, if we can't touch sidewalks, so for example, if we have individuals, whether they're here for court or whether they're staff or whatever, and who are smoking and vaping, that's their prerogative. They need to leave the property to the adjacent sidewalks, and then they're fine to go. So, Dina?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If committee wishes to...
Sorry,
make an
can you
amendment-
speak up just
sorry.
a little?
If committee wishes to make an amendment to this draft bylaw, if there was a certain consensus, there is opportunity now to direct some amendment so that the bylaw does come back with amendment that, with the amendment included. So there is that opportunity at this point, if you were to gain some consensus that we can go back, make that amendment and bring forward the bylaw still at the...
Thank you, Dina. I was trying to hint at that because I know I can't make the amendment. So I was trying to hint that if somebody was of that same mind, that they could propose and someone second the amendment. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move that motion that we take out the exemptions in the bylaw.
And so moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Watson, that the exemption section be removed from the bylaw, and that a new, now do we need to include that a new bylaw be brought forward to,
That the amended
an amended bylaw be brought forward? Okay, so I'll read this motion as amended then, as an amended motion, correct?
Yes, and sorry for clarification, Mr. Chair, are you suggesting that the amended bylaw as directed by committee be brought forward to council for adoption?
Okay, thank you. Okay, other comments? Councillor Bright?
Yeah, question to Jeff through you. Obviously thought was given to listing these places. Is there a reason that you think we should leave them in there? Is my first part of the question. The second part is in terms of enforcement. Is it possible to enforce this?
Is it possible to enforce it in the current state?
Yes. Well, so if we ban all smoking for everywhere, like, do we have the ability to enforce it? Or is it just a rule that people will consciously break until it becomes, you know, like, we can all go 10 over the speed limit because we know they're not going to stop us?
Mm-hmm. Through you, Mr. Chair. There was consideration to keep those and put those in the bylaw. Basically, an example was City of Barrie. They did the similar thing. They included designated smoking areas. To your question, if we can enforce it, we can. The thought process was to only manage our own properties as opposed to all public places, so we still have a shared partnership with the health unit. So by managing our own properties, I think we have the resources able to enforce this effectively. Whether that's on a complaint basis or if we're in the area and we see it proactively as well, I think we have the ability to do so.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Belanger?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess I'm a little torn on this, and the reason being is that, like, I don't know what input, like with Public Works, clearly some of our employees smoke. If 20 meters away was a concern for other employees, if there had been that consultation, I would quickly agree. But if in general this was a move that was acceptable to all employees within a unit, I would support it, only because smokers tend to smoke regularly, and if we're forcing them completely off of the property, you're going to be extending breaks, you're going to impact productivity, you're going to be moving them closer to residential areas in some of these cases. So I would want to have some understanding of whether there was any employee consultation on some of these locations, because it makes sense if it's a compromise that works for the entire unit, for non-smokers and smokers. I'm not a smoker, so it's easy for me to say, you know, hey, yeah, you shouldn't smoke anywhere. But the reality is there is, and this will have an impact and a cost to the municipality. So I would like more information.
Okay. We have a motion to refer. It's been tabled. I think I'm required to take that motion, and then we can continue discussion so we've got a motion on the table
There's a motion to refer.
to refer.
Was it refer or just to remove Appendix A?
Was it to remove?
Or
Sorry,
Schedule A?
I said refer, to remove the section. I'm sorry, it was Councillor Watson, Councillor Kinney that moved to remove the section. And that's the point we're talking about now. So is there any further discussion on that?
Just to comment, I agree with Councillor Boulanger. I think that there was reasons to put this in here, and we will have staff who maybe, you know, not willy-nilly smoking all over, but if there's a designated area, then I think we do need to consider that. So for that reason, I don't support just fully taking it out at this point.
Okay, well, I'm going to call the motion, so I'll be reading it as amended. Sorry, George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to mention about the sports park. The sports park is a large area, includes the driving range, includes another tenant that we have there that offers skydiving services, and there's a snowmobile club. There's a number of tenants that I just wanted to remind the committee about the sports park, that it's a large area.
Okay. George?
I think some of the points that have been raised by Councillor Boulanger and that have some merit with a couple of these areas and what the CEO has mentioned. So I can't vote against it if it's going forward, having moved it. So, but I think there is some merit on. You've already listed the other properties that the province says we cannot, but. I could see that with Public Works. I guess the fire hall was the same consideration because there's probably some of our employees that smoke also in big areas. So I'd be prepared to, I don't know what the procedure is for
You
that.
could choose to remove your name as a mover of the motion.
Yes, I would ask for that.
Then Councillor Kinney is left as the seconder, or could move it, and whether there's another seconder or not. Councillor?
Mr. Chair, I think record says I moved it.
I'm sorry, I thought I had it the other way around. I thought it was Councillor Watson and seconded by you.
No.
I'm sorry, it was the other way around. Okay, understand correct. So are you still prepared to move the motion, Councillor, or do you wish to withdraw?
Well, Mr. Chair, I felt strongly enough to move it. I won't be disappointed if it got turned down.
Is there a seconder for the motion to remove it? I see none, so that motion did not go forward. It's as drafted. So I'll read the motion again, just for clarity, that the General Government Section of Coordinated Committee recommends to Council that it receive the staff report of the Coordinator of Municipal Law Enforcement and Property Standards on the smoking vaping on municipal property bylaw draft, and the General Government Section of Coordinated Committee recommends that Council approve the draft smoking and vaping on municipal property bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? There is one opposed, which is myself. Okay, we're moving. Sorry, Councillor Boulanger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. Can the Chair not second the motion?
The chair can second the motion, correct?
So
Okay.
I just wanted to make that clarification for future motions. So.
Okay. That was not my understanding. Thank you, Councillor. That was not my understanding. I was not aware that I could move or second. So.
You cannot move the motion, and you may second.
Oh, okay. You learn another new thing every day. All right. So it should should have seconded it, but it wouldn't have made any difference anyway, because it would have been defeated. So ultimately, the end result is we save time. That concludes we still have an 11 o'clock commitment. We've concluded the agenda for general government. We have a closed session. Our legal counsel is here. Do we wish to move immediately to closed session and then come back at 11 and then cease at 11 to allow for the? I look to the legal counsel. Notwithstanding that some of us might be very wordy, but from your perspective, would 15 minutes cover the nature of your?
I think so. I think I can be fairly brief.
Okay. All right, so I'll read the motion with respect to closed session, and we will do that, and then we will definitely come out of closed session at 11. If need be, we can go back into closed session following. So it is resolved that pursuant to section 239 sub 2F of the Municipal Act as amended, the next portion of the January 23 coordinated committee meeting will be moved into closed session to discuss advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bray. We are now in closed session.
we'll call this meeting back to order. We are the Development Services section of Coordinated Committee, and we have an 11 o'clock public meeting which will convene at 11:07. And this is a proposed amendment to the Town of Wasaga Beach Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2003-60 and proposed draft plan of subdivision, part of Block A, Plan 912, Wasaga Beach Ventures Incorporated. Notice of public meeting was published in the Wasaga Sun newspaper on Thursday, December 26th, and circulated to all agencies, service providers, and school boards as prescribed in the Planning Act. This provided 20 days of notice for the public meeting, and this meeting is therefore properly constituted as required by the Planning Act. The purpose and effect of the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision would include to enable the development of the subject lands with 10 residential single detached dwelling units having driveway access off of both Mosley Street and 62nd Street South. As a result of the circulation of the notice of public meeting, the following written comments were received. Letters of support, none. Letters of no objection, Hydro 1, the Town of Wasaga Beach Engineering Services, Simcoe County District School Board, Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board, Bell Canada. Letters of concern, none. Letters of objection, none. Ms. Nolan, have we received any further letters of correspondence in regard to this application?
No, we have not.
You're welcome to join us at the table if you'd like.
Perfect.
Thank you. Town planning staff will now make a brief presentation and will provide further details with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision. The floor is yours.
This is the first time I've done the technology side, so I'm just getting Alan to help me.
Excuse me, could you speak a little bit louder? I know, we can't hear down
Yeah,
here.
I'm just getting Alan to help me because
Okay.
I haven't done the technology piece of this before, so I'm just,
Thank you.
bear with me.
Council's revised.
This is an update to what was in the report.
Yeah, it's a revised slide.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Alan. All right, so welcome. This is a public meeting for two applications, draft plan of subdivision, as well as a zoning bylaw amendment. And there we go. Okay. So I'm Julie Nolan. I'm a planner here at the Town of Wasaga Beach, and I'm here to introduce the application on behalf of the applicant, Wasaga Beach Ventures, Inc., and show the proposal that's being applied for on the subject lands. So I'm going to provide you a summary, next steps, and then at the end I can take any questions. So just to do an overview of the purpose of the meeting, the purpose is to meet the legislative requirement under the Planning Act and to introduce the applicant's proposal to council, general public, and any other stakeholders that may be here today. This platform provides an opportunity for council stakeholders and any interested parties or individuals to submit written or oral submissions and comments to the planning department. Okay. So today, if you provide oral submissions, it's actually preserving any rights that you may have to appeal to the local planning appeal tribunal at a later date after council has made a decision. So to introduce the applications, There's a draft plan of subdivision and a zoning bylaw amendment application for the subject lands. The applications were received on November 21st. I think I merged the two dates there, but it was actually on November 21st, and it was deemed complete on December 19th. The lands are legally described as part of Block A, Plan 912, and municipally addressed as 3219 Mosley Street, and they're proposing 10 residential lots. The subject lands are located on the southwest corner of Mosley and 62nd Street South. Okay. The parcel has a lot area of 0.67 hectares or 1.66 acres. And the surrounding uses are residential, and the current use on the property is vacant. Okay. So the public notice that went out in the newspaper on December 26th, as well as a mail out to landowners within 120 meters of the property, is to fulfill the legislative requirement under the Planning Act for both draft plan of subdivision application and zoning bylaw amendment application. There was also 2 signs that were posted on the property, one along Mosley Street and one along 62nd Street, to ensure that the public has access and knowledge to the public meeting. If we take a look at the official plan designation on the current property, it's designated as residential. Surrounding the property is also residential. There is, to the west, a small parcel of institutional, and there's a school that is currently vacant and not used as a school. Taking a look at the zoning bylaw, the Town of Saga Beach zoning bylaw 2003-60 as amended. The current zone is development, and the proposed zone will be residential type 1 with a special exception. So that special exception will only be on that parcel of land and will remain on the new lots that are created afterwards. Okay, so this slide has actually been updated. I would like to point out that there was an inadvertent oversight when preparing this slide. If anybody would like a hard copy of it, I can provide that to you. Would you like one?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Actually, if I could have a couple, that'd be great.
Can I have one too, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Of course. And I lost one left here. Okay. So I just want to take a look at the proposed zoning. So for the property, the lot area that is required under the R1 zone is 464.5 square meters. The applicant is proposing 385 square meters. So they're looking for a relief of approximately 80 meters, so 79.5 meters. The lot frontage under R1 is 12 meters minimum. The applicant is looking for 11.5 meters, which is a difference of 0.5 meters in lot frontage. Looking at the interior side yard, the requirement under R1 zone is 1.8 meters. The applicant is looking for 1.15 meters, which is a difference of 0.65 meters in the relief that they're asking for. And the lot coverage on the properties that are along 62nd Street, they're looking for 45% lot coverage, which is 10% more than what is currently permitted under the R1 zone. So just to make that clear, the lot coverage increase will only be along 62nd Street and will not be along the properties that are on Mosley Street. Another relief that they're seeking is the deck encroachment for the front yard. The bylaw under the R1 zone permits 1.2 meters minimum, and the proponent is asking for 1.5 meters. So they're asking for a relief of 0.3 meters of the front yard encroachment for a deck. And the last relief that they're looking for is the minimum distance between a driveway and an intersection. Right now, the R1 zone requires 9 meters from the point of the intersection to the first driveway. The proponent is asking for 2 meters, which is a decrease of 7 meters. Okay, so this is a look at the lot fabric. There's 10 lots proposed, having 4 lots along Moseley and the other 6 lots along 62nd Street. The image to the right is the proposed lot building fabric and building envelope on the parcels that they're proposing. And if we go to the next slide, you can see here that these are some mock-ups of the proposed building types. These are the elevations of potential homes that would go on these properties. So these are more types that would go on the properties, and it would depend on the envelope side as to which house could either fit on the property, or it could come down to a personal selection for a home buyer as to which house type that they would want on the property. So just to recap again, the comments that I've received to date are from the town's engineering services, Hydro One, Bell Canada, Simcoe County District School Board, and Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board. There's no objections from any of these stakeholders. However, they have provided some conditions to the draft plan approval that would go into either the conditions of approval or the subdivision agreement. Okay. There we go. And I would like to remind you that today is an open public meeting for people to take part, to provide comments, either oral or written submissions. Staff has not completed a full detailed review of the application, and the next steps are for staff to provide a recommendation report to council, and then I also have my email up there if you would like to provide any other comments or written submissions. And we accept written submissions up until just before council does make a decision, when the recommendation report does go forward. Okay, and that's all from me. I will hand it back to Madam Chair.
Thank you, Julie.
No problem.
Is the property owner and applicant's consulting planner from Evans Planning in attendance? And would you like to provide any further details with respect to the proposed development?
Madam Chair, I do have a few comments, but I just question whether it might be more productive if I hear from my neighbors, and then I can respond to any comments or questions that they may have.
Okay.
Is that?
Yep, that's the next question.
Okay.
So is there anyone here present that would like to provide input either in support or in opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment or draft plan of subdivision? If so, please stand and clearly state your name and address in order that it may be correctly entered into the record of today's proceedings.
My name is Jane Gray, Gray. I live at 88 62nd, and that's on the south side. The first question I have, is there any way we can go back to the pictures of those homes?
Yeah, for sure.
Just because it's most recent.
Yeah. It gets a little stuck here.
I noticed there's quite a big difference in the frontage size of those homes.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one with the two, I don't know.
So the one to the left are the front elevations. The one to the right is actually the same house. The bottom is the frontage, and then the one above that is the side.
So what are the lots all equally sized?
No,
they're not.
No. If we
is there any way we can get a copy of? You had a photo of how the lots were laid out, 4 along Moseley, 6 along. If I could get a copy of that, that would be awesome. I'm a little concerned as well about the distance between the driveway and the intersection. On the end of 62nd Street, both the public school system and the separate school system, I believe, pick up children for buses. I have a hell of a time getting out at the end of the street.
Yeah.
When they're there, which is fine, I don't have a problem with that. But when all that space where they're standing, like there's 10 or 15 kids there, now we're adjusting it from 9 meters to 2 meters, which is 7 meters, which is a lot. That's gonna cause a problem on that corner for access, for sure. I don't I have a school-age child, but the end of our street at school time, there's gotta be 15 kids standing there at about this point. So is this telling me that 2 meters? So how far from the corner is the first house? Like lot 5 there? How far in from the stop sign is that? Is my question. So if you're at the corner of Mosley and 62nd, that first house, it looks like lot 5, how far in would that be?
May I answer, Madam Chair?
Yeah, sorry.
That'd be awesome.
The situation here, through the chair, is that we can't quite see it because it's under the stats. The house is set back from what will be the future road allowance, or the future street line. So it's set back about 6 meters at the very bottom end of the house, and it's 2 meters to that lot line. So at the narrowest point, it'll be 2 meters away. However, to answer your question about the setback from the driveway, dare I say, it's a bit of a technical issue, is that, again, you can't see at the corner, and there's a site triangle, which is a piece of land that's to be conveyed to the municipality to ensure that there's visibility to the street.
Right.
That triangle would be a setback from the widened portion. So we're going to give some land to widen the road.
Right.
And then it'll be set back another 4 meters. And then we're asking that we be allowed a driveway within 2 meters from that. So it'll be 6 meters from the widened portion of the road. So it'll be more than what you see today.
Okay. I guess the other question that follows that is, on 62nd, those of us face, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's 144 lots sitting behind us that are all individually owned. So the last time I was at a town meeting, there has to be drainage of water. It's swampland back there. So we were told there was 144 individual lots. 20% of them had to come to an agreement that they were going to build before the town would invest in draining the water, whereupon people along the shoreline said, well, we don't want that water to come down here. And so there was a big kerfluffle about that, which affects us because we were told our street would be urbanized. So my question is, in a roundabout way, is how will our street be urbanized with sidewalks before this building takes place? So, like you're talking about the little triangle and the widened part, and because we have culverts.
May I respond, Madam Chair? I guess firstly, a little bit of history for council's review. The property that Ms. Gray is speaking about is a very large property. I believe it's about 36 hectares of land. And back in the good old days when there was a bit of a wild, wild west and lot creation, it's called checkerboarding. And you could just basically go in and register surveys and you could alternate lots. And there is a plan that shows the lots. However, it still needs to be serviced and built upon. So that, as you referenced, it requires a consensus of the landowners to go through a local improvement charge in order to build the roads and the sewers and the lights and the sidewalks. And as I understand from speaking to staff, the owners of those lands have been approached multiple times and it has not progressed because, quite frankly, one now has to put some money up in order to do so. So, very long-winded answer to your question, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
But, so if indeed that ever gets developed by either local improvement or someone acquires it all through a plan of subdivision, that drainage would be taken care of through the design of that property.
Right.
Our obligation here is twofold. One is we cannot create drainage going on to anybody's property, and I know our neighbors are here today, so that might be a question. So if we get approved, council sees fit, there will be a big design for our property done by our engineers, and it will deal with where catch basins are and the grading of the property, how the drainage from our property gets captured, and it will be taken out to Mosley into the municipal system. But most importantly, how we will not be able to be draining on other people. So we can't come in there and create something that causes drainage to our neighbor's property. And lastly, any drainage that comes onto our property now as a current situation, there's a riparian right that we must accommodate that in the future. So if that land that you referenced drains through our land, we have to accommodate that and keep that drainage pattern alive and well and functioning. So it should not, we should, quite frankly, typically when you start to injure these things, it'll be better than the natural situation.
Okay. Let me see what else.
Just one moment, Ms. Gray. RCAO has a comment to add.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I ask you just to flip to slide number 7, please? Just, I think it's going back. It gives the overall lot fabric. There we go.
My eyes are.
If we, yeah. So, just to answer your question, Ms. Gray, with respect to 2nd Street, I don't have the answer to that, but I see our planner was making a note, and she'll find out about the status of the urbanization of 2nd Street and get back to you. But with respect to the drainage, and just to further address the comments that the consultant made, there is a plan to address the drainage from the lands to the south, that subdivision that you're speaking of, the 144. The town is working with the landowner here that has the D on their property to bring the drainage through that property as part of the redevelopment of these lands. So the lots to the south, the lands will drain through this property, through an outlet to the beach. So that won't impact 2nd Street. It's basically going to flow through this development, and plans are underway. The town is working with the developer and the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority on the alignment of the drainage. So that's how those lands will be drained.
That would be great, because that was kind of an unanswered question, and I didn't want to come today and find out that, heaven forbid, Zancor had bought all that land and all this land, and as a homeowner, I wanted to make sure, the city or the town had my best interest protected. The other thing that I had a question for, and it goes a fair bit back, would there be lights there at the end of the street then for access? There's a long way between the roundabout and the last set of lights, where in the summer it takes you 10 minutes to walk across the street to the beach.
Lights are 58th Street.
Yeah, go ahead.
4 streets over.
Hi, my name is Helga Goran, and I'm right next to this property here. And I just will say that the land is very wet. What they did behind us, the new house on 62nd Street, there is this creek flowing, a natural creek. The builder at that time, a few years ago, filled it all up, and we're getting all the drainage. So the backyard, our backyard, is literally a lake every spring, and I do not like it. We had a duck swimming on it. It's just like a lake, like a pond. The other thing is the drainage on this particular property. The water sits along the lot line and into the property, so they would have to fill it up to build, and we're getting all this water on our property again. So I don't like that part, and I definitely agree with all what the lady said here about the traffic on the corner. The children, we're getting all the traffic from Ramblewood Drive coming up 62nd Street. The children are standing there, they should be protected, and I cannot see 6 driveways on 62nd Street. That is beyond me. When I drive around, come down 62nd into our property, that I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 homes, I don't know. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments?
Yes.
My name is Mary Catherine Kavanaugh, and we totally agree with that. I just want to go up here for a minute, because if people are not familiar with the area, you don't maybe realize that 62nd Street is like a short thoroughfare to Ramblewood, and we get a lot of traffic, shortcut traffic that wants to go to Collingwood and wants to go down to the beach. These people that would like to go down to the beach that drive down that way, and that's our main concern is the traffic. I don't know if they've taken this into consideration now. We just live north, so I'm speaking from that point of view. But what we're finding, and we've tried to lobby for 2 years now for no parking, because in the winter it's the snowmobiles and all. And okay, the other thing I wanted to point out was right at the end of 62nd Street North is the postal boxes. So we have a lot of traffic with people coming postal every day. And I know you think it's only maybe 10 houses, okay, 10 more cars every day coming down to get their mail. But the streets are narrow and there's not a lot of, the cars come down quickly. So from Ramblewood right through, we get like all that traffic coming down to the beach, and also from to get their postal. And what we're finding is they're not very conscious of the seniors and the children. We have children and we have a lot of seniors, and they're not that quick moving, and children are carefree. And that much more traffic, we're wondering if they've thought about that. If they put a light, that's great, but maybe they need to decrease the speed limit and put the no parking so that it's not such a, the residents are really, last year, there's no way a fire engine could get down our street. And that's not fair to us residents who live there that might need a fire engine or an ambulance. You know, I don't know if they've thought about this part when they were thinking about doing these houses. I hope they have, and I don't know if this is the time to just say it, but we just wanted to make sure that you would think of the people that are already here and living with this day to day. The snowmobiles are incredibly fast. You have no idea, and I don't even know why these people aren't at work during the day with these kids out waiting on the corner, and the snowmobiles are going so fast. They cut right across Moseley. I'm talking about, they go right down to the beach.
Excuse me.
I think that's pretty well it. We know the sewers are going to be coming on the street. That's basically, we're just more worried about the traffic and the parking.
I'd still like to say something. In the summertime, it's a hard time now to crossing Moseley Street for us. We've been there for 56 years to cross the street when our grandchildren or great-children are there. And it's just impossible. Nobody will stop for you. Now, can you imagine 6 homes with all the traffic and families with children trying to get across the street? So this is my biggest input. It just doesn't seem fair.
Thank you. Mary Catherine, did you give your address for the record?
1962nd Street North.
Thank you. Are there any more comments? Seeing none, I will ask members of the committee if they have any questions or comments with regard to the proposed amendment. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was going to ask staff, with the concerns with pedestrian, narrowing of streets and that, have we done any kind of a traffic study in that, or is that something that's going to be coming along?
There is.
I know there's development going through on that. I wasn't sure if it had been captured yet or what.
Yes, there's a report that was submitted by the applicant that addresses the traffic in the area, so that will be taken into consideration.
Mr. Murray, did I see you have?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may make a very short pitch before you get into questions that it might be of some use for council.
Absolutely. You can join us at the table.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of council, my name is Murray Evans, planning consultant for the owner. And if I just have a few comments and perhaps address some of the comments we've heard just recently. As you know, the site is, as you saw from Ms. Nolan's presentation, the site is designated residential. So it's in your official plan, it's contemplated for development. It's zoned development, so it's somewhat of a bit of a, dare I say, a holding or a warning zone. It's saying something's coming, we don't know, you need to have a look at what it is and what's appropriate. So in this case, what we try to do is incorporate zoning attributes from the area. And Alan, can I get you to come up here and work this? I had zero chance of working this. If I go to the draft plan. See, I would never be able to do that. There you go. That'll be great. So in this case, in this question, we've heard the question of lots. The standard R1 zone is 12 meters, as you saw in that chart prepared by Ms. Nolan. The lots, there are 2 lots on 62nd Street, which meets it. The lots on Mosley meet that standard. There are 2 of the 6 lots fronting onto 62nd Street, which meet that standard. The 4 in the middle are 11.6 meters. So you're that short from meeting the bylaw. And the thinking is that when you drive down the street, you won't be able to discern whether that is 12 meters or 11.6 meters. And it's not necessarily putting 20 pounds in a 10-pound bag. It's coming up with a layout that is appropriate. And in this case, we thought that works. And we've adjusted the zone standards. And you saw from those building plans that Ms. Nolan put before you, that it's not a case of trying to overdevelop it. These are, I'll say, modestly and appropriately sized homes of 1,700 square feet to 2,200 square feet. And they're on one level. So it's not even that these are, dare I say, the monster home syndrome. And all of the front yards are met, and what we tend to use in, certainly in the suburban world where I live, my backyard. And the backyards, as you can see on the plan on the right, all of the lots exceed the bylaw. The lot 5 meets the bylaw, and then lot 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 range from roughly 9 meters to 13 meters, whereas 7.5 or 7.6 is required. So it's not a sense of being overdeveloped. And the question now comes in is what is an appropriate land use? And I've heard physical matters, drainage, and I think it's fair staff can assure you, and I can assure you that when we go through our engineering drawings, we will certainly be required to ensure that drainage does not spill to our neighbors. And to be honest with you, the property drains from south to north. So we would unlikely to be pushing drainage onto our neighbor's property, but I understand that's a concern, and that will be addressed. And if there's any laying water that I've heard that in the spring there's water, well, clearly those properties will be graded, so water will drain towards Mosley Street and away from our neighbors, and that may be through swales or through rear yard catch basins, as the case may be. And now, with respect to traffic, and I understand that whenever we do a lot of infill development, it's always an issue of changing the look or the feel of the neighborhood. So in this case, these are all single-family homes. They're bungalow-ish, and it's about a story and a half. So poor phrase, bungalow-ish, but
some of my friends here are a little hard of hearing. If you could speak up a little more,
I will do my best.
That would be great.
I will do my best. So these homes, we believe, will be in keeping with the nature of the surrounding area.
Excuse me.
And what we're trying to do is we have a clash of issues that we would like to have enough parking on the properties so we don't park on the streets. Everyone, when they have parties, will have people on the street. No one can avoid that. And that's why we're asking for the driveway situation. The 4 units in the center of the plan fronting on the street onto 62nd Street have garages with single car driveways, and the remainder have double car driveways. Even the lot on lot 5 at the corner, and that's why we're asking for that setback adjustment from what is technically the road, which is the extent of the site triangle. We could adjust that to have a single car driveway. Clearly it wouldn't function as well, and that's an issue as far as sight lines. And to answer the question, will there be a light? There certainly won't be a traffic signal. There probably won't be enough traffic generated by this project. And I guess our traffic people have looked at it, and I know no one believes the traffic engineer when they write a report. But in this case, we have 6 homes fronting onto 62nd, and the way, and I don't mean to speak down, but the way it's calculated is you check the peak hour travel behavior. So in this case, typically, you will have anywhere from 3 to 4 cars an hour in 1 hour of AM peak. So you would have 6 to 8 vehicles coming and going to the site in the morning peak, and probably 6 to 8 vehicles coming back in the evening part. So that basically is 3 cars per hour, on average, 1 every 20 minutes. So I would suggest, and that's what the recommendations of our traffic engineer were, that there really won't be an impact from a traffic volume perspective. And generally speaking, the traffic pattern would be that people will be going north to Moseley to go wherever they're going to go, shopping, work, or to the beach. So there will be very minimal impact on our neighbors to the south. As far as the road widths, we can only work with the property we have. We have tried to align the driveways as best we can, and if we need to work with Canada Post to relocate a post box, we can certainly do that and make that effort. I would offer that for the most part, those people fronting on those lots on Moseley probably going to walk to the mailbox. So is there a possibility that'll increase that activity? Not an awful lot in my mind. So what we try to do is come up with something that is generally in keeping. You do have a density factor in your official plan for what's appropriate, and we're under that density. So we're obviously, this is early in the project. We are certainly willing to look at the zoning standards, and if we can help in any way to address those comments, we will please do so. And I'll be quiet right now.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mayor Volchi was next.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments to residents in attendance. Everything that you've mentioned today, staff take back, and all of those matters will be looked into. But I think that we did hear a couple that maybe weren't directly related to this development that I will get forwarded on to the appropriate staff, like the parking issue and things like that, that doesn't get missed in this process. It's not directly related, but I think that needs to be passed on. And same as the postal box. If I understood, it's on the other side of Moseley. So it's not directly related to this, but I think that maybe staff could look into that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm surprised that town engineering didn't comment more about the corner. We know that's going to be 4-laned, the whole stretch. The engineering has been completed for the 4-laning of Moseley Street right out to Beechwood and the roundabout. My understanding was that there was going to be signalization at 62nd Street. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if planning knows that or not, but I've heard that during the engineering part that's now been completed, engineering along Moseley Street. So that was a consideration that's probably going to be a signalized intersection because there is a long stretch in between. And could I ask planning, what's the cutoff point where you need a stormwater management pond for, this is being done under plan of subdivision, I presume, as opposed to severances?
Correct.
Is there a requirement for 10 lots to have a stormwater management pond?
There isn't necessarily a requirement to have a stormwater management pond. There is a requirement to manage stormwater. So in this case, there is storm sewers, and through the detailed design, they'll have to work out with engineering on how that drainage will look. Engineering didn't comment on a full review because they said that they would provide more comments when we get closer to the detailed design phase, and that's when they can look at the more detailed aspects and provide a more working relationship, because there's several reviews of the plans that get submitted, and that will take time in the future. So
are you sure there's stormwater?
oh, sorry. Do you want to speak up? Alan can speak more to this, I guess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To you, Councillor. If I may add to Julie's comment as well, a big component of stormwater management facilities in draft plans of subdivision is to deal with quality and quantity controls for subdivisions that involve the construction of new municipal roads. New roads to be conveyed to the municipality, which this development does not include. Arguably, the proponent could have sought to proceed with this development plan by way of consent for 10 lots. That would have caused them to incur more application fees because of 10 lots times the consent fee versus one draft plan of subdivision. In addition to the fact that the development of these lands also required a zoning amendment, for which of course council is the approval authority. And so part of the discussion at the pre-consultation stage with the applicant was that they could pursue both the lot creation proposal as well as the zoning amendment proposal through a single approval authority being council.
Supplementary, I think there's a cutoff on consent, is there not? I don't think it goes up to 10 lots that you can sever by, I think you have to go plan the subdivision. There's no alternative.
Through Madam Chair, many official plans do have thresholds. The town's official plan does not have a prescribed threshold for how many lots would trigger the need for a draft plan subdivision.
Or for consent, I'm talking about, like, you indicated that they may have been able to come in and sever 10 lots, which I was under the impression we do not allow a 10 lot application for severance. It would have to go by plan of subdivision.
I'm not sure of its relevance, because we're talking about a plan of subdivision, right?
No, but the comment was made by planning, and I'm also talking about the drainage, and my supplementary question is there stormwater piping on the street right now? I don't believe there is. It may come in when we do the four laning, but it's just a culvert right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no stormwater system in our sewer system in this area.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. We would have to take that back to Public Works and Engineering Services to ask for confirmation as to what is existing as well as what is proposed or envisioned by way of the Moseley Street urbanization.
I would think, but I think again it was kind of indicated that there was stormwater management there, and I don't think there is. So that leads into my whole thing about stormwater management, pond drainage, and just how that's going to be handled.
Mr. Evans wanted to comment?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Watson, this is our engineering analysis, so it's calculated the flows that come on the site and will be leaving in what will be, I'll call it a suburban condition. So now we have more driveways, we have more roof, we have patios, so they take that hard surface into account in their calculations. And they are better than traffic consultants. They've calculated this, the volumes coming on and how it has to go in the receiving ditch system. So through the chair to Councillor Watson, typically you will need a pond if you have more water leaving than the receiving body can accommodate. So it has to be detained somewhere. In this case, they are suggesting that in the rear yards they have these called soakaway pits. And basically they're big holes in the ground that you fill with gravel. And you swale the properties so they will drain to that soakaway pit, and it will be held and released that goes into the ground. And anything else that flows over the surface because of the driveways and the roof lines goes to the ditch system. And that has been, I guess, the water has been held to allow that so it wouldn't supercharge your ditch system.
So they'll drain into the culvert then?
Yes.
And there's going to be a catch area at the back?
Of each lot will have this soak-away pit. So it's not a hole, it'll be flat ground, but on the subsurface will tend to be very permeable materials. It's a special type of gravel or stone. And that is, water is directed beyond what the ditch can accommodate. It goes there and is held.
So will water be sitting then for mosquitoes?
No, it goes into that. It goes into that.
So it'd be like drainage tile on a farm kind of thing?
Somewhat similar to that, yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Watson?
Who's going to be maintaining these? French drain, soak-away pit, whatever you want to call it. But these have issues when you do commercial development and parking lots. They make you put a separator in or tie it into the municipal system. In this case, you're going to have these pits after 5 years or something. If they get filled, which they do, sand, earth flow into these, and they become useless at the end of the time. Who's going to maintain and if the property owner does not maintain them, then they're not going to do the job that they were intended to.
These typically are the obligations of the homeowner.
Yeah.
If there's an issue arises through the subdivision agreement, there'll be these notices registered on title and the obligations And you're absolutely right, people tend not to do that. They buy a house, they don't even read your subdivision agreement, they do not know what the obligation is. So if an issue does arise, then the municipality has the right to go on and clean these pits, and it's typically the cost of that is borne by the homeowner.
So when
Did
people
you want to
build
comment?
that,
Did you want to comment?
I just heard another voice there.
Oh, okay.
oh wait, go ahead.
Yes, if I may, Madam Chair. So just a question with respect to the design of the subdivision that was selected. Looking at the property, what jumps out at me is the large rear yards here. And did you look at alternatives in terms of the design, like perhaps a private road coming in here and the units, instead of these units fronting on the public road, flip them around and have a private road, these units would front on a laneway in here, these units, and it would just exit here. You've got 10 units shown on this plan. If you did a redesign, maybe you'd get, I would think you would get the same 10, maybe more. Did you look at alternatives in terms, because that really jumps out at me, and I'm looking at the efficient use of land, and I'm thinking there had to be a better way to maybe lay this out, and maybe you have a reason why you selected this versus alternatives. Thank you.
Through the chair to the CAO, absolutely. We looked at everything from a small apartment building to street townhouses, the condominium townhouses, to a small subdivision on a private road. And effectively what happens is, you're absolutely correct, you would bring a road in the middle of it. You would have to have a turnaround of some sort for garbage pickup, snow removal, Leon's delivery truck, and that turnaround all of a sudden becomes complicating to the design of it. And then also, two things. We didn't want to turn our back on Mosley Street, and secondly, the lots then become very short. And if you put that road in, it looks expansive in that, but if you stick a road in, or even a private lane, it becomes a maintenance issue, then it becomes a condominium issue as well, that there has to be arrangements. So quite frankly, at the end of the day, a business decision was that we didn't want to overdevelop the property. We did not want to get into an issue of amending the municipality's official plans. And brutally, it's quite simple to do a nice draft plan of subdivision. The ownership sells the property, and then it's people move on and you have ownership. So rather than tying potentially 8, 10, 12 units in a condominium arrangement, it was just considered to be a simpler process.
Thank you. Councillor Boulanger, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just further to Councillor Watson's comments, there's been quite a number of residents have felt concerned to me about the ability to cross Mosley Street to go to the beach, and I can't recall if it's 62nd Street, but the indication I was given from our Director of Public Works is that in the urbanization there will be 2 crossings added and a consideration for a third. We're well aware of the residents' concern along that stretch.
Is a crossing painted lines on the road? Because you're gonna have to be bigger than me to stop the cars, honey.
I believe in, as Councillor Wells said, that I believe 2 of them will be
I don't think
traffic
it's
lights.
part of this public meeting, though. Okay. Right, we're here to talk about this plan. Councillor Wells?
I just want to comment that that's a vision. I don't want people feeling that this is all going to happen in the next year and a half when this subdivision is developed. This is all in the longer term engineering of Mosley Street from 45th Street to Beechwood Drive, and is several years down the road. So I don't want people thinking that next week there's going to be a light. All the design work has to be done, and then funding to even do the project has to happen. So I think we need to be really cautious, and I'm not sure that that discussion, other than the issue of the intersection, is really relevant to the plan that's being discussed today.
I just want to say that I understand what you're saying, but you know, when you're thinking of just a plan, you have to be proactive and think of how it's going to affect. Like, you know, it's really important, the lights, even if it doesn't affect those 10 houses, it's really important, that corner to the residents and the traffic and what's happening. And there's no other lobby, at least I don't know of any other lobby that you can come to talk about that after it's been decided. So, you know, we know that maybe we're not speaking to these 10 houses, but we're trying to speak to the welfare of Wasaga Beach. That's just what I want to say. And safety, like number one is safety.
Thank you, and the mayor did point out earlier and ask that staff take those comments back to the appropriate department, so.
No, it's just that, I know, and I'm hearing that, but there's no other, like, did we ever get anything that said we could come and speak about, like, this other stuff? Like, this is the only place we know to speak to that. Do you know what I mean?
There certainly are public meetings as the plans to urbanize Mosley Street move forward. So continue to watch the newspaper. I can reach out to Jane and give her a heads up when I see something.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor Byfolchi?
And I was just going to say, you can also contact Public Works now and go and have a discussion with them, and they can kind of tell you where they're at. Answer some of your questions as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just something I also heard about, snowmobile going really, really fast down the road. And this might be a mute comment, but the OPT should be patrolling it. And my overall thought process is, if you phone and you don't get a response, don't stop phoning, please. Because communication with our members over there is important, and I come from the knowledge that they do care. Not having resources isn't an excuse, but it's reality. So as much as we can get information shared, but I think that would be something that they would like to know, if they don't already know.
And I think the reason I brought it up, sir, is I just wanted to impress upon people that 62nd Street is a unique street, and I don't know if the developers have even thought about that it is like a shortcut for all these vehicles to come down from south. The other streets don't have like that run like we have on 62nd Street, and that's why I brought up some of this.
Thank you for sharing. Seeing no more comments? Comments received today will be considered, and a decision will be made at a future meeting as to whether committee will recommend the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision proceed further through the approval process. Anyone receiving notice of the public meeting will receive notice of the decision of council in this matter. If you did not receive this notice and you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please leave your name and address with the recording secretary or make a written request to the clerk of the town of Wasaga Beach. Thank you very much. This meeting is complete.
Thank you, Madam Chair.